رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم رب زدنا علما ووسع لنا في أرزاقنا وبارك لنا فيما رزقتنا واجعلنا محبوبين في قلوب عبادك وعزيزا في عيونهم وجيها في الدنيا والآخرة ومن المقربين. يا كثير النوال يا حسن الفعال يا قائما بلا زوال يا مبدئا بلا مثال، فلك الحمد ولك المنة ولك الشرف على كل حال. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Alhamdulillah, this is our second day for our fiqh class. Yesterday we talked about the definition of fiqh, the word fiqh. Can someone raise their hand to tell me what does al-fiqh mean in Arabic? Okay.
Understand. No.
To understand, to know. Very good. And in specifically when we talk about fiqh, our in Sharia or in our knowledge of the Sharia, what is it known for? Al-fiqh. What is the definition of fiqh? Fadhali.
Knowledge of rulings and principles.
Knowledge of rulings and principles. Okay. Is that enough? The knowledge of principles or rulings. It's better to say rulings here. Al-ahkamu bil-shar'iyyah or al-ahkamu bil-shari'ah. Now, anybody? Anybody complete the definition? The knowledge of the rulings of Sharia. Al-mustanbata min adillatiha at-tafsiliyah. Min adillatiha at-tafsiliyah, that's the second part. Al-mustanbata, it is متعلق محذوف ظرف اللغة. Here is going to be ظرف مستقر. Those who are studying Arabic with me, that's why I'm indicating to that. So من أدلتها التفصيلية, driving the rulings from the principles that are detailed. Okay, so what are the principles that we drive these ahkam? For example, wudu, salat, fasting, right? Halal and haram, right? Permissible, non-permissible. How do we drive these rulings? What are their main principles? The four. No, not the four schools of thought. That comes way after. But what are the adilla at-tafsiliyah, the dalail? Where do we drive the rulings from? Number one, the Quran. So, wudu, salat, ablution, praying, fasting, zakah, hajj, where is it driven from? The Quran. Okay, then if it's not in the Quran, then hadith. I heard someone said sunnah. Sunnah. What's the difference between both of them? Hadith and sunnah.
Like what the Prophet said.
Very good. Said.
The sunnah is what the Prophet
There's more to that. Said.
Sunnah is what the Prophet said, what he didn't say, what he did and what he didn't do.
sayings and doings.
Okay, that's kind of getting mixed up. Sayings,
And
doings is aqwal, af'al, taqreerat, right? Taqareer. What is taqreer? Affirming something. Okay? These are the ahadith. And what is sunnah? Or is it the same as hadith? No. Okay, why no? Why is the answer no? Okay, because I didn't explain what is sunnah and what is hadith, the difference between both of them. Very easy and very briefly, I will say that sunnah is الطريقة المسلوكة في الدين, the way that a person will take in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The path that you choose, the path that Allah has already chosen for you, and you're going to take that path is called the sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ said that عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي, that hold strong to my sunnah. And then he repeated the word again, sunnah. Otherwise, ma'tuf alayh. If you're going to say, this door belongs, or this camera belongs to Ammar and Mahdi. So I will not repeat the camera again. I will say the camera belongs to Ammar and Mahdi. But if I say the camera belongs to Ammar and the camera belongs to Mahdi, I'm repeating it again. Because it's not the only sunnah that it is mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. And that will bring us to the third part of the dalail, adillah, the principles that where we draw the rulings from. So the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. And that's why it brings us to the third part, ijma'. So we have Quran, right? The hadith, and then ijma'. Ijma' means the consensus of the Sahaba or the scholars from the second, third generation, and so on and so forth. And it goes all the way down. So the ijma', it is something that it is very important, and that's how we drive rulings. The example for ijma' is that there is a consensus of the scholars that wiping over leather socks is permissible. And it goes against the ayat of the Quran where it says, wash your feet. وَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. Wash your feet. So Allah is saying wash your feet. But why do we make masah on the socks, on leather socks? We will talk about it in detail tomorrow, inshallah. Okay. So leather socks is permissible to make masah because there's an ijma'. 70 Sahaba approximately narrate the hadith of making masah on the socks from the Prophet ﷺ. So the four schools of thought, they all agree that it is permissible to make masah on it. And that's why Imam al-Tahawi, he mentions that in Aqeedah, that as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we believe that it is permissible to make masah on the socks. It's part of our Aqeedah. And that's why I mentioned last night that Fiqh, it is on its own, but it's different than the Aqeedah and Tasawwuf and Ihsan and Suluk. There are three parts of our deen. But they are somehow related to one another. They have a relation between Aqeedah and your suluk or tazkiyah, right? So ijma' is this. So Quran, hadith, ijma'. And then what is the fourth one? من أدلتها التفصيلية. قصاص. What do you say that again? You have to know these words.
Where the rulings insert key search.
Yes.
Al-Qiyas. So the great scholar of the book is called Nur al-Anwar. He mentions the usul al-Sharia, that the usul of the Sharia are four: Quran, Hadith, Ijma', and then he says al-Qiyas, again al-Mustanbata min al-Thalathati, that the Qiyas is based on the Quran, Hadith, and Ijma'. So a person cannot use logic just because he thinks it's right. It has to be based on the Quran and the Hadith and the Ijma'. And that's why any layperson cannot say, okay, I'm going to do qiyas here, right? I'm going to say this is permissible because I think it's right, right? then what happens? May make a mistake. So qiyas is also driven from the three major principles. So that's fiqh, right? And then we have the usul al-fiqh that talks about the principles of how you drive these, how do you use Quran, how do you use hadith, how do you use ijma', and how you're going to use qiyas from these three. And the scholars of our deen have made a great effort, and we owe them a lot, that they have made it so easy for us that we can have a small little book and just read the rulings without doing all the effort of making something permissible or not permissible, something halal, something haram. You just read that this is haram, this is halal, this is permissible, this is not permissible, right? This is fard, this is sunnah, right? Inshallah we'll talk about the terms fard, sunnah, mubah, mustahab, and all these terminologies that is used in fiqh. We will talk about them inshallah tomorrow. So all of these things that are being taken from the three sources: Quran, hadith, and ijma'. All these things together, they become sunnah. All these things together, when you put all of them together, it becomes a tariqat al-maslukatu fi din, the way that is taken in our religion. The way that we take in our religion, that's our deen, but it is based on these four principles. طيب. So today, inshallah, that was something important to do a little review. So inshallah, today we will talk about purification and some of the principles. And I will quote a few principles, and based on those principles you can see that what things are permissible, what are not permissible, different types of water, different types of najasat, impurities. So we will first talk about the water, okay? To understand different types of waters. So basically there are three types of waters. Ma tahir, that is pure. This water that I'm drinking, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ma tahir. It is also known as ma mutlaq, al-ma'ul mutlaq. Water that does not have any other name to it except that is water. It is used to drink, it is used to wash, it is used to put into the plants, and basically everything is alive through water. So that's water. Al-ma'ul mutlaq. So that could be rainwater, it could be water from the well, it could be water from the rivers, it could be water from streams and different types of waters. So that's al-ma'ul mutlaq, or ma' tahir. And then tahir, it has two different types. So tahir, mutahhir, and tahir ghayr mutahhir, meaning that pure water that can purify, or pure water, clean water, tahir water, that cannot purify. That it is pure in itself, it is pure, it means tahir in itself, but it does not purify. The example for the first one, tahir and mutahhir, is this water. I can use this water to make wudu or to take a ghusl. This is clean water, it's tahir, and it's also mutahhir, that I can purify, meaning that I can do wudu with it. And if there's any najasa somewhere, I can wash with this water. This is ma tahir and mutahhir. The example for the other, tahir ghayr mutahhir, meaning that it is pure itself, that if it falls on my clothing or my body, or if it mixes up with my food, somehow I consume it, it is tahir, it is fine, but it's not mutahhir, it will not purify, meaning that you cannot use that water to make wudu. And the example for that, it is al-ma'ul musta'mal, meaning the water that is used water, but it is not any used water. For example, someone goes and washes his hands, and the water that is used to wash the hands, that water Is that water considered ma'ul musta'mal? So the scholars have defined ma'ul musta'mal, which is tahir and ghayr mutahir, meaning is pure and it does not purify. Is that the water that is used to purify one's hadath asghar or akbar, meaning that if you use it to make wudu or ghusl, right? To make wudu and ghusl. And the second condition that is used for wudu and ghusl, that is intended to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm making wudu so I can read Quran. I'm making wudu so I can pray 2 rak'ats. I'm making wudu so I can be in the state of tahara, so I can get closer to Allah, and I'm in a state of purity. So that's one meaning. Or he intends for a specific ibadah, a specific act of worship. Making wudu for praying salat. Making wudu for reading Quran, right? So on the other side, it means that if a person makes wudu without any intention, right? If someone goes, he has no intention of actually making wudu to be in the state of purity or to do an act of worship. He's just making wudu, just washing his limbs, just to make it. It's very hot, he wants to wash his limbs, and he washes all the parts, the fara'id. That water, it is still tahir and mutahir. It doesn't become ma'ul musta'mal. Right? Likewise, if someone washes his hands, right, just washing his hands, it is not intended for an act of worship, and is not intended for something to get close to Allah. And the scholars define it as لِلْقُرْبَةِ أَوْ رَفْعِ الْحَدَثِ. Right? Al-qurba, raf' al-hadath. To get closer to Allah, to be in a state of purity, or to do it for a certain action. And that action is an act of worship. Like for salat, reading Quran, entering the masjid, praying salat al-janazah. Right? Being in a state of tahara. So that's ma tahir ghayr mutahir. That if that water, that used water, if it spills on your clothing or your body, it does not make it najis, you can still pray. So while people are making wudu, some people have a habit of splashing water in it. Right? Someone is sitting next to you, after you wash your arms, all the water is dripping on that person. Is that water najis? No, it's not. You can still pray. And after you finish your wudu, the water is left on your body, right? It drips on your clothing, it drips on your body, on other parts of the body. It's still permissible, right? طيب. And then there is ma najis. There's others, but to summarize it, these are the three. Ma'un najis is water that anything impure has come into contact with that water. Right? Any najasa. Okay. Now when it comes into contact of any najasa, anything impure, like urine, blood, then that water becomes najis. That water, you will treat it as urine or blood. So for example, if a 1 drop of blood falls into this water, this whole thing, it will become najis. I have to close it and throw it away. And if any of this water spills on my clothing or my body, I'll have to wash that part, because the whole thing became najis. Right? So that's al-ma'u najis. Now, if the water is in big quantity, the Shafi'is have qullatayn, a certain amount. According to the Hanafiya, there are two different types of ma'ul kathir, lot of water, lots of water. Lots of water, the two types, one is ma'ul jari, running water. So for example, there's a stream, and it's very thin, right? It's not a lot of water. But Since it's running water, it's coming from a far distance, it's coming from miles back, and it's running, so that does not carry the najasa. So if any najasa falls, any impure thing falls in that water, it stays tahir. It doesn't change the ruling for that water, because that's a lot of water. It's ma'ul kathir. The second ma'ul kathir, lots of water, is the water that is in a big pool, a big pond. And there's the definition that they say that 10 by 10, meaning that there's a lot of water. It's a big pond, like you have a big swimming pool. So if najasa falls in that water, it still stays pure until you can smell or taste or see the najasa. Meaning that the water's color changes a little bit, slightly change. Or if it doesn't change, but you can smell that najasa in the water. Or if someone drinks that water, and if he tastes the najasa, then it becomes, the whole water becomes najis. But a little bit najasa does not make the water najis. So everybody knows what is najis? Who doesn't know? Raise your hand if you don't know what is najis. Impure. Najasa. Tayyib. So, in conclusion, or going into the principles of the water, is that the principle is that al-aslu fil ma'i at-tahara. Every water, in its origin, it is tahir. So any water you find anywhere, in its origin, it is tahir. Meaning that if you see water, it just rained, there's water on the ground, it's tahir. A river, it will be tahir. Water in this bottle is tahir. Unless, if I know for a certainty, yaqeen, or there is a ghalib al-dhan. How do you translate ghalib al-dhan? Ghalib al-dhan. Anybody knows? Al-dhan al-ghalib, huh? Overwhelming thought. Okay, let's translate it that way. Overwhelming thought. That your inclination is towards that this is najis. That it looks like that there's something in there, right? Because I can see it, smell it, or taste it, right? And that's going to make it najis. Otherwise, every water is tahir. Until you don't see for sure, certainty, yaqeen, or ghalib al-dhan, right? Overwhelming thought. So what is the principle again? Al-aslu fil ma'i at-tahara. The water in its origin, it is tahir. Until the next part. Al-yaqeenu la yazulu bil-shak. Number 2. Al-yaqeenu la yazulu bil-shak. And this ruling you can implement in many things. And that's how the fuqaha have implemented this into many rulings. But here we will implement it to water, because we're talking about water. Al-yaqeenu la yazulu bil-shak. When you have certainty about something, shak it means you have doubt. So doubt does not nullify certainty, right? I know for sure that this water is tahir, because the origin of this water, it is tahir, it is pure. So I can doubt anything. Maybe the people when they were bottling this water, something went in their hands was impure, and some of that water touched the najasa, and some of that najasa went into the water. I can have doubt about anything, any water. The supply that we're getting here through the pipes. Maybe there was a dog, or a big cat, or a rat died in one of those pipes, and the water is passing through that dead animal, and the whole water becomes najis. I can doubt that. You can doubt so many things. So the doubt does not nullify yaqeen, because yaqeen, certainty, is strong, and doubt is very weak. It could go either way. It could be true, it could be false, right? So al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak. The example is that, okay, let's first talk about the different types of animals. There are two animals, and specifically, there are two animals that there are haram, there are najis, they are impure, and their saliva is also impure, according to the Hanafiya. The Malikiyas differ in that, in the dog. So the dog and the pig, there are najis, meaning that their meat is haram, the blood, everything is haram in their body, and their saliva is also najis. So the saliva is also najis, meaning is impure. So if someone sees a dog passing by a little bit of water and he wants to use that water to make wudu, and he sees a dog over there, and he's not certain that whether the dog went in the water and his saliva touched the water, meaning that he put his mouth in the water, and the water is very little, it's not a lot of water, that he could say that it is tahir, like we mentioned in the first category. So that's suspicious, that suspicion that you have over there, it is not going to nullify the yaqeen, the certainty of that water being in its origin as pure. Understood? So the ma is aslu tahirun, that the origin of water is tahir, and then yaqeen la yazulu bishak. Until you see by your own eyes that water, that the dog put his mouth in the water, or you have two witnesses come and tell you that the water was used by the dog. That means the dog went in the water and his mouth touched the water. The saliva of the dog, people have a lot of, soft heart for dogs in the society that we live, and right, people love their dogs. People, they have a lot of respect for the dogs, and people take dogs very serious. And right, you cannot, if you say something which is offending to the person about his dog, the person becomes very offended. So we have to be careful about that, especially when we have non-Muslim relatives or friends. But in Islam, we have a great deal about dogs that they are najis, and the saliva is najis. However, according to Imam Malik, the saliva is not najis. Meaning, if the dog touches something, or licks, or touches your clothing or your body, right? When you go to people's homes, you have dogs. They come and you sniff, and they kind of put their saliva on your clothing or your body. According to the Malikiyya, it's not najis. But the three A'immah, and in particular Imam al-Shafi'i, 7 times you have to wash. For any other saliva, 3 times. Or any najasa, 3 times you wash. But for the dog, 7 times. Right? And 1 time with dirt. So the Hanafiya also take that. And they say that it is fard to wash it 3 times, and it is mustahab to wash it 7 times, and the first time you use dirt to clean it off. It is mustahab, according to the Hanafiya. So there's an i'tidal, right? The mizan became even. Anyway, so if you are in a situation where it is hard to prevent yourself from that situation, then in certain cases you could take the opinion of Imam Malik, because sometimes you have to pray and time is very short and this thing happened, what are you going to do? Right? So you could take the opinion of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, but it is najis.
So last night you told us not to go hopping. But can we hop in that case?
Only in a desperate... I will come to that, because there's a principle that I'm going to talk about, inshallah. It's coming. The third principle, that غالب الظن ملحق باليقين. Right? When you have enough what was the word again? غالب الظن? Overwhelming thought. So overwhelming thought, it is like yaqeen. It's like certainty. So, for example, that if two people say that this water is najis because we saw najasa falling into it, right? And one person comes and says, no, it is pure, it's tahir. I haven't seen anything falling into it. So there is overwhelming thought for the one person saying that no, it's tahir. But when two people say, because two witnesses, it is regarded as yaqeen, right? So we will take that and we will treat it as yaqeen, that certainty that some najasa fell in the water because two people are saying, right? On the other hand, we have one person saying that it is tahir, it is pure. So غالب الظن ملحق باليقين. طيب. Number 4. الأصل إضافة الحادث إلى أقرب أوقاته. The asl is that something that a person is not certain when did it happen, you will refer that to present time, right? For example, I don't know if this water, it became najis an hour ago or 2 days ago, right? So when I see this thing najis, I will consider it najis from now, right? If I made wudu from this water 2 days ago or 1 day ago, I will not consider that najis at that time, because I don't know when did it became najis. Maybe it was najis 10 days ago, maybe a week ago. So when I know that is najis, it will be considered from that time, right? Most of the examples that is given in this, one of the examples is that when you find the water najis in a well, and you don't know, and you see a animal fell in the water and died in the water, right? The fuqaha say that you have to take all the water out, and if it's small, then a certain amount of buckets you take it out of the water, and then the water becomes tahir. But you see the animal there, but you don't know when did it fall in the water, when it fell. We don't know. I made wudu from that water and I prayed my maghrib, my asr, my dhuhr, my fajr, and one day before, it could have fell last night. But right now I'm seeing it. Right now I know this is najis. So the salahs that I prayed with that water, the wudu that I made with that water, right, for maghrib, for the asr, for dhuhr, all of that will be permissible and it will be fine. Because right now you're seeing it. So what is the ruling again? إضافة الحادث إلى أقرب أوقاته, to the closest time, right? So the scholars say that if you find out, right, in the time of dhuhr, that the water became najis, so if you use that water within dhuhr time, if you have prayed with that water, then you should repeat that salat. It's best to repeat the salat. But you don't have to repeat your fajr or the last night Isha salat or before that, because it's going to be ruled as present. طيب. المشقة تجلب التيسير. The next principle. Principle what? Number 5? طيب. المشقة تجلب التيسير. Meaning that difficulty draws easiness. When there's difficulty in something, then that makes the easy one permissible. The example is that if you have a well, or you have a place where you have the water stored, and there's birds, different types of birds, they always come around that place. And it's hard to make them not come and to prevent them, because you don't have any source to do that. In the places where they have wells, it's very hard for them to protect the well, unless if they cover it. Sometimes they cannot cover it. And there's always going to be birds around, and they're going to their dumping is going to fall in the well. So, because it's difficult to prevent that to happen, the fuqaha say that is permissible, and the water of the well, it would stay tahir. Tahir. The next part, the next asal, the next principle. الضرورة تبيح المحظورات. الضرورة تبيح المحظورات. That, what is the saying in English for that? In Arabic it says الضرورة تبيح المحظورات. Okay, it's not with a dhal, it's with a dha. Al-mahdura. So ibaha, it means making something permissible, and hadar, it means to make something not permissible, to make something haram, or to make something unlawful. Okay, making something najis, for example. So darura, necessity, makes not permissible things permissible. Example. Allah says in the Quran, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. The person who, this is outside of our discussion, this is an example from the Quran, that a person who is being forced to say something against his belief, a word of kufr, but he has strong faith in his heart, right? Someone has a gun on his head and makes him say something against his belief, and he's forced to say it. If he says it and he has firm belief in his heart, it is permissible for him. Because there's a darura here. There's a need here. And what is that need? His life. Right? He's going to lose his life. The other example for tahir and ghayr tahir, tahir and najis things, is the food, the consumption of something which is haram. So darura. There is a need for a person to stay alive. And how does he stay alive? Water, food. If a person does not eat for many days, if he has something haram, he has nothing halal, everything that he has to eat is haram, he cannot find anything besides haram, and he's in a situation where, he has to stay alive. So here, it is permissible for him to eat that haram food, to consume that haram, because he's going to lose his life. The example of water, it could be that a person sees water that is najis, right? He knows that is impure water, and he's thirsty, and there's no other water besides that najis water. And it's a principle that whatever is najis, whatever is impure, to intake that, to eat or drink that thing, it is not permissible. Anything that is najis, like for example, blood is najis. You cannot drink blood. You cannot intake blood, right? Urine is najis. It's not permissible to consume urine. Anything that has urine in it, you cannot consume it. Anything that has pig in it is haram, is najis, right? Pig is najis, is impure. So to intake or to consume pig or anything that relates to the pig, it is not permissible. So if I have water that is najis water, now to consume it is not permissible, but I'm thirsty, I'm dying, I need water to drink, then is that water permissible or not? Al-darura, the necessity of life, of staying alive, makes this non-permissible, or this najis water, permissible. So I can drink the water, even if it's najis. Okay. From this it stems another ruling, and it's very important to know. الضرورة تقدر بقدرها. That when there's a need, a necessity, the necessity of drinking this water, this najis water, because I don't have any other water, I can only drink the amount that will keep me alive. I cannot drink the whole bottle of water, because it's najis. So الضرورة تقدر بقدرها. You will not exceed the limits. According to the need, the bare minimum you will use, right? So that's why if there's something that you have to eat and there's no other halal food, and that's the only food in your you're very hungry, you're starving, you cannot take, okay, I'm going to have full meal, 3 course, right? I need appetizer, I need entree, I need a dessert as well. So that's not permissible. You can take only the amount, you can intake or consume the amount that will keep you alive and keep you, conscious. So, al-daruratu tuqaddaru biqadariha. Bismillah. One important principle here. ما ثبت على خلاف القياس فغيره لا يقاس عليه. Sounds good, right? ما ثبت على خلاف القياس فغيره لا يقاس عليه. I'm saying the Arabic because there's people here who know Arabic. If you want to write down the عبارة. ما ثبت على خلاف القياس فغيره لا يقاس عليه. Meaning that something that is derived against qiyas, then other things you will not compare the other things to this thing that is against qiyas. For example, when you break your wudu, istinja should be enough, right? When you use the bathroom, you wash yourself right after that. So you are cleaning yourself. Why should a person make wudu? It's against the qiyas, right? If there's a najasa, you have to clean that najasa off. But why when you bleed from one place, you have to make the whole entire wudu? Right? So other things, like use water for that, right? Use water to wash your body. So now someone says that, okay, I'm making wudu and ghusl, so I can use water, but also I can use a can of soda, right? Or a bottle of apple cider. Is that permissible? It's not permissible, right? فَغَيْرُ لَا يُقَاسُ عَلَيْهِ. Other things that it is not water or not ma mutlaq, you cannot use that for purifying. It is tahir, apple cider, it is tahir, that's why you consume it, but you cannot use it to purify. One important... Now?
I didn't quite get that. Can you just say again the principle?
Okay, the principle is ما ثبت على خلاف القياس فغيره لا يقاس عليه. That washing the body, washing the limbs with water, it is something that it is against qiyas, right? Just making istinja should be enough. So you cannot say that, okay, I'm using water to make wudu and to make ghusl, I'm going to use something that is like water, and I'm going to say, if water is permissible, so something like water, it should be also permissible. So this, using water for making wudu and ghusl is against qiyas. Qiyas, it was that just istinja is enough, right? And that's why there's some detail of which other waters you can use it for istinja and you cannot use it for wudu. Okay, we will not go into that. The last one, very important one. لا صياغ للاجتهاد في مورد النص. When there's a clear nas. Nas, it means a clear text from the Quran or from the hadith or from the ijma', then I cannot use qiyas over there. Because what was the order? Quran, hadith, and ijma', and then qiyas. So where the Quran says aqimu salah, I cannot say, okay, I think 5 salats is not enough, I'm going to pray 50, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning, before meeting Musa alayhi salam, thanks to Musa alayhi salam. Right? You have only 5 salats. So a person says, no, I'm going to do 50 salats a day. You cannot. طيب, so لا صياغة للاجتهاد في مورد النص. And that's why the scholars, even the أئمة أربعة, the four schools of thoughts, the scholars of these four schools, they always say that if you find something that is against the nas, one of these three, then you cannot even take our own opinions. And they never said anything, they never gave their own opinion against these three principles. If there's a Qur'ani ayah, a nas from the Qur'an or from the hadith or from the ijma', they will never put their own opinion out. It's very clear, right? There's no qiyas, right? So that's, and there's no taqleed in that. There's no following that, because the Quran, it says, aqimu salah. No one is going to say, oh, maybe aqimu salah here it means the linguistic meaning. As-salah in Arabic, if you look in a dictionary, it means to pray. It means supplication, dua. So if someone says, I'm going to go make dua, right, because I think the meaning of salat, it means supplication, dua, I'm going to just make dua. Right? So you cannot do qiyas over there. You have to use that nas. Did you find your answer in one of them? الضرورة تقدر بقدرها. According to the need, you will keep that in the need. So you will not say that, okay, anytime the dogs or any dog touches, the saliva touches my body or my clothing, I'm going to say it's tahir, I'm going to go according to Imam Malik. If you are a Maliki, good for you. But if you're not, then you have to go according to your madhab. طيب, and don't be a hopper. طيب. Let's go to some other rulings quickly, inshallah. Today I was intending to do a little more Q&A, inshallah. I'll just go for a couple more minutes. طيب. Talking a little bit about that principle. There's a principle that al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir, that difficulty brings ease and comfort. For example, if you're washing, right? Those I do a lot of washing. That's why I'm giving the example. Washing dead bodies, right? So sometimes there is najas on the body, and usually there is. So when you're washing the body, sometimes, or most of the times, and usually it happens, that while you're washing, little drops, they splash on your clothing and on your body. While you're washing, there's a little splash, right? As you're washing the body using the pipe. So sometimes little splashes come on your body. So the fuqaha say that here is a mashaqqa. If you're going to have to, make sure that your clothing, it is dry and not a single drop touches your body or your clothing. Over there, the difficulty is that then every time you make ghusl, if a person, that's his job, in many Muslim countries they have a specific organization for that, and there are people that's their job. They wash bodies, many bodies in a day. So every time they wash, they'll have to, it's difficult. So the fuqaha say that it is permissible for him to pray in that salat, even if some of the drops touches his body or his clothing. Right? The other example. Normally on the streets that are main streets or the inner streets, a lot of times there is najas on the street. Right? People, they throw alcohol bottles and all kinds of things on the ground, and you don't know what goes on the streets, right? And sometimes there is najasa that you see it physically, but when it's raining and you're walking in the street and that water splashes on your clothing, that's another example, right? Places where it rains a lot, right, like here. Or places where there is a lot of najasa in the streets or in the places where we walk. There's always najasa laying around. So when it rains, that water becomes najas in that area. So if a little of that water splashes on your clothing, right, or on your socks, then that it is it is accepted as permissible to pray in those clothing. And you don't have to wash that part of the clothing if you see any splash on your clothing. So meaning that you don't have to wash that part. It is permissible. Okay. Another principle is that al-ma'dumu la ya'ud. Al-ma'dumu la ya'ud. That something that disappears cannot appear again. For example, that if I see that there's a najasa on the ground, now if the ground is najis, there you see the physical najasa laying there, if you remove that from the ground, or any surface that does not penetrate through it. So for example, this surface is solid, so if anything falls on this surface, it doesn't penetrate through, right? The ground has the same ruling. So if you remove that najasa, right, and there's no effect of that najasa on the ground or on that solid thing, then it's fine, right? But if you throw water on it, sometimes the effect comes back, right? But you're not certain, right? Because normally you cannot see it, you cannot smell it, and no one's going to go and taste it, right? These are the three sabat to find out if this thing is najis or not. So that najis, it will not return back. Meaning that if there's water, if you splash water on that place, or if it gets wet, and you step in that place, it's tahir. It's permissible, and it's pure, and it's not impure. Right? So the najasa doesn't come back. So, because a person may think that if it was najis, it was impure that place, when water came into contact with that place, there's going to be some kind of effect. But al-ma'dum, what is the word? Al-ma'dumu la ya'udu. Al-ma'dumu la ya'udu. It does not return. طيب. Okay. Another important asl, principle. إذا اجتمع الحاضر إذا اجتمع الحاضر إذا اجتمع الحاضر والمبيح رجح الحاضر. If there is something that indicates to its permissibility, and you have another source that indicates to its impermissibility, that this is saying is haram, this is saying is halal. This one is saying it's najis, and this one is saying is tahir. So which one you will prefer? Which one you give preference to the other? You give the halal over the haram, or the haram over the halal? The tahir over the najis, or the najis over the tahir? Which one you will choose? Which one you give preference to? So when you have two equal evidence, you give preference to the things that it makes it haram, or it makes it najis. So there are two words, hadar and ibaha. Hadar and ibaha. Hadar, it means something that it stops, right? It makes it impermissible, it makes it haram, it makes it najis. That's hadar. And ibaha is to make something permissible, whether making it halal, whether making it tahir, etc. For example, you have pure water, right? And some najasa falls into that water, right? So you have what? You have hadar, you have najasa, and then you have ibaha, you have clean water. So when these two things come into contact, which one are you going to say that now the whole thing became tahir? Or are you going to give preference to the najasa? And you're going to say the whole thing became najis. The whole thing became najis. Right? Because there's tahir and najis. They got together. And you couldn't say that the whole thing, it is tahir. And this is very little, so it's part of it. The whole thing is tahir. Or we say that the whole thing became najis because now it's part of the najasa. So we will give preference to the hadar, meaning to make it impermissible or to make it najas. طيب. لا عبرة للتوهم. This, the next principle. لا عبرة للتوهم. I think we covered it somehow in one of the principles. When you have doubt about something, you don't consider that. Doubt is not considered as an evidence for something to be permissible or not permissible, for something to be tahir or not tahir. And the example I gave before was what? Water, you don't know if there's najasa in it, I don't know. You just kind of feel, you have a feeling that maybe it's najas because somehow it doesn't taste so good. It doesn't taste right. The best example for it is that a person who has a doubt, he knows for sure that he had made wudu, and now he's not certain that he broke his wudu or not. Right? So that tawahum, that doubt, you would treat it as nothing, not available, doesn't exist. Right? It's nil. So لا عبرة للتوهم. What is the principle? لا عبرة بالتوهم. One important principle to know, and since we are living in a society where we have a lot of non-Muslims that prepare food, prepare things for us, how do we deal with them? The principle is this: العادة محكمة. العادة, habits, are muhakkima, they give a ruling. For example, normally when they I'll give an example of the bottle. It's always in front of me, so I'm going to give an example of bottled water. Normally when they fill bottles with water, it's usually tahir. They don't use anything that makes it impermissible or makes it najis. It's just filling the water. It's regular water, tap water. I don't know what is it. People say that tap water is better than bottled water. But anyway, there's nothing used. Normally, the the norm is that they do not add anything impermissible in the water. So it's Places where they prepare food, and you know that this company or this specific vendor does not use any pork or any other najis things, then the you will take it according to the norm, that it is permissible. You do not have to go and suspect everything, that maybe he put something. You have to go and question. You don't have to question everything. Otherwise, the life will become so difficult, so miserable. And what? What was the principle? What are the principles that we spoke about? Ease. Right? المشقة تجلب التيسير. That difficulty brings ease. Right? المشقة. So here, العادة محكمة. So, in a Muslim country, it's easy that normally the food industries, they do not use any permissible items or ingredients. So you will take their food and whatever they produce and the products, and you will use them. You will not go and question every product. But if you're living in a place where the norm is that they will add different other ingredients, then you should be careful. And it is important to make sure that there's no haram ingredients in the products, right? Right? How do you agree? I think this is going to get too much. Let's stop over here. And let's take a few questions, inshallah. Any questions? There's many hands. Let's go with Abdul Qadir.
I have a question. Like you're saying, dealing with non-Muslim relatives and things like that. So there's many questions that come from that.
Many.
These things that we deal with them. So specifically, let's say I go to my grandmother's house, and my grandmother, she made something, and she says, "Oh, I can see it's vegetarian, it's whatever, potato salad, or something that has to be cooked." Like say she cooked an egg for me. So it's an egg, and she cooked it with butter. But then the pan, she may have cooked, God knows what she cooked in there. So, but with her regular washing of that pan, with soap and with a scrubber, would that have taken...
And a dishwasher.
And a dishwasher. Would that have taken care of anything that she would have cooked in the pan anyway, so then, you know what I'm saying?
Like the residue of it.
Yeah.
The best thing is to do ihtiyat, meaning that to make sure that the things are the pan and the spoon and the spatula and the things that are used in cooking. If you know that they take care of washing them properly and they use the dishwasher, so those things, it makes it really clean and it takes away any residue of any other products that they may have used, which is not permissible. So in that case, if you have itminan, right? If you have contentment that they have used, they have washed it properly, and you have that feeling, and you can trust yourself on that, right? So in that case, you could accept their food and whatever they cook. But if you have doubt, and you know for sure that they use different items that they cook that is not permissible, and then they have a habit of maybe using that same spoon or the same pan or the same plate or different utensils, then it's best to stay away. The ihtiyat is that.
And so then just one more aspect of that, then is the same najasa, and also find it's in pork or anything you cook, like say you cook some bacon and grease, and this is all najasa. But is that the same thing then if they cooked meat that wasn't dhabiha from beef or chicken? Is that grease also najasa?
Yeah. Yeah. Any like beef, if it was not slaughtered properly, then that meat and the pork meat in the najasa is the same.
Even the grease from the
Even the
non-dhabiha
grease.
beef or anything?
Yes. It will be considered the same in najasa. But pork is definitely a different level. But in najasa, because if there's the pork that is came into contact with this cup, I have to wash it 3 times, right? Or until I don't see anything on the cup. Same thing, if any other najasa touches the cup, I wash it the same way. So same method of washing, the same way of washing it and cleaning it. No. It's
Oh,
fine.
thank you. I've heard of someone, I'm not going to name names, but my dad, he orders pizza.
You already said that. That's fine.
No, he's not here. But he orders pizza and he asks the guys not to cut it. And he comes to the pizza place with his own pizza cutter. Because he doesn't want them to cut his cheese pizza with the same cutter that they used on the pepperoni pizza, and it's made for some awkward phone calls and some fun pizza. Is that, what do you think of that?
It's perfect, it's okay. Because he's bringing a clean one and he's cutting it in front of you, slicing it in front of you. And normally in the diyanat, in our dealings, the Shari'i perspective is that a non-believer, his witnesses, his shahada is not acceptable. That's the asl in the madhab. But if there is a ghalib al-dhan, as we said, it gives the benefit of what? Of certainty. The overwhelming thought, it gives the ruling of certainty. So if you know that, by law they have to be very specific in their whatever they state, and they have to be true in that. So we will take the word for that. So normally when you buy food and stuff like that, pizza, you should make sure that they wash the cutter before they...
That's real tricky, because instead if you know that there are Muslims that's selling pizza and they're taking the precaution, why wouldn't you just buy from the Muslims? Rather than buy with people who may not only be in the cutting, may be in the ingredients, the cheese, all of those kind of things.
And a lot of times they don't even know. A lot of Muslims don't know what is halal and what is haram.
Right.
They don't know how to clean things and what are the things that is not permissible. And they will, let alone talk about.
And the other part of that is that, there are some that says instead that because they read, and I guess again instead they would have had to have these classes to understand that they're not scholarly enough to make that determination, but they would say, from Quran it says you can eat the food, understand, of the people of the book. And then it says, well, understand, this meat here, this beef, this lamb, understand, it's allowed. Gallons of house been slaughtered, so forth. It's the people of the book.
Yeah,
so we can eat it.
A very quick answer or a comment to that is that Allah says, وَطَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابِ, right? The food of the people of the book. It doesn't say dhabiha. So if a non-Muslim gives you water or gives you an apple, is that permissible? There's no question. You're not going to ask it, did you make dhabiha for that apple? So it talks about ta'am in general, food, right? But when it comes to slaughtering and the method of cutting and slaughtering the animal, then there are other ayahs that indicate to that and specify those areas. So, إِلَّا مَا ذَكَّيْتُمْ, one verse, and وَكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ, the second verse, and the third verse is لَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ, very clear, that eat from the food or consume the meat that on which the animal was slaughtered with the name of Allah. Right? And don't eat from the animals that were slaughtered without taking the name of Allah.
There's another kind of a sticky problem that comes up as well, is that you have some that they're Muslim, but they may not trust other Muslims on whether they're eating halal.
Yeah.
Although the Muslim says, that yes, this is halal. I bought it from the halal market. I did, took all the precautions. Not only is it halal, it may be all these other considerations. But now the area that the question I'm asking is, what about suspicion when it comes down to these things?
The hadith, here we will touch ihsan. We will touch on tazkiyah, the third part of our deen. The Prophet ﷺ said, دَعْ مَا يُرِيبُكَ إِلَى مَا لَا يُرِيبُكَ. Leave the doubtful things and go to the things that are no doubt in them. Right? Because we always have other ways. There's not only one place to go and buy meat from. There's not only one place that we can eat from. Right? There's not only one type of food that we can eat. We have hundreds and thousands of different things to eat. Right? If all the chickens were haram, let's say, they were not slaughtered properly, and they're non-dhabiha, and there's problems with them, then you can eat fish. Right? It's healthier. It tastes better. Right?
No problem with dhabiha.
And good for health, right?
No dhabiha problem.
And there's no dhabiha. Right? Except for the bodies, they make dhabiha for the fish. I think that there's one person over there. I'll come to you.
My question is about the dog.
Longer one.
The life of the dog is, but if in this society we leave dog is everywhere. How about the touching the dog? You go mall everywhere.
You can touch the dog.
It doesn't affect the wudu or no?
No, it doesn't.
It's saliva.
The saliva.
What about the people who shake your hand and you know they don't even clean their hands? And which is common, this etiquette is so tough here.
People use the bathroom and don't wash their hands.
This is very common in this
It's
country.
very, very common.
Right? And then now, I try not to touch their hand, but
It is very common.
Doctors, mashallah. It is permissible to test your hand, even if it's najis.
Right.
unless if there is something on their hand,
Obvious,
or if the hand is
full
wet.
of filth, you know.
If the hand is wet, then you should,
No, not wet. I mean,
yeah, you should prevent yourself.
And,
Otherwise,
you know, apparently, I mean, we definitely deal with the patient incontinent and all those, and they try to help you. They don't touch your body. I mean, this is so difficult to avoid sometimes. Then what? And now I cannot go back home, change my clothes. I have to wait to my prayer. What do I do? Keep going.
What is it? You have something?
I
There.
mean,
You can give a suggestion. I don't come into contact a lot of those.
the people, I mean, over here, you know, usually they don't keep tahara for their clothes even, you know. The clothes are even dirty, you know. They go, they urinate, they don't do whatever it is, but the clothes are all soaked and everything and it looks dry.
There is a ruling that if it's not a'inun najasa, meaning it's not urine, it's not anything that is like
Okay.
blood or any of those things, but the water itself was najis, right? And that it touches the clothing. And then there's wetness of that najis water on the clothing, and you touch that with another clothing, right? And the water touches the other part. So the muftabi or the fatwa is that the other clothing, it will not become najis. So that's one way of dealing with it. Who didn't go? Let me go to you, Brother Yamin, then I'll come to you. And then I'll come to you.
One problem we done all this, we go to the fast restaurant, they sell veggie patty, they sell tuna fish, and also they're selling sausage, bacon, smoked ham. Do we allow to get the sandwich from them?
If you know that when they prepare those things, for example, tuna, they do not mix the pots or the scoop, or whatever they scoop it without the spoons and different things that they use to serve. If they don't mix them together, right, then it's permissible to buy from them, right? So you just have to make sure that it doesn't mix. They use a separate spoon to scoop out the tuna. Normally stores, they have a separate spoon for each one of them. And they use, what are called those gloves. These are a lot of things you just have to figure out.
They're using some gloves with other stuff.
Let him go first, inshallah. Yes.
Building off of that, like the Zabiha questions you were asking.
I don't know, how did we get to that?
I don't know.
Consumption, food, ma'kulat. Talking about tahara. Okay. Okay.
I figured I'd take advantage of the topic switch. Can you like give us your nasiha on the whole divide of hand slaughtered versus machine slaughtered?
Oh, that's a whole topic.
Yeah.
If it's too much to cover, we can speak afterwards.
Always try to prefer to get meat that is specified as hand slaughtered.
Okay.
Normally, goat, cow, and these animals are usually hand slaughtered. But sometimes there are some problems with their slaughtering as well. Like cows, different ways of slaughtering the animal, because there are 4 veins that have to be cut. Sometimes they cut in a different way. That it does not cut all those veins, the arteries. So, but usually they are halal. But when it comes to chicken, it's very, very, very shady, very gray area. Because what happens that they use when they use the machines to slaughter the chickens, they're running through that blade. Sometimes there are cuts, sometimes it just goes through without cutting, or cutting just one vein. And then if it's only one vein cut, that whole chicken becomes what? Najis. And then that meat is always mixed up with the other chicken. And then you don't know which one is which. So we're not saying that all the machine slaughtered chickens are haram. They're non-dabiha. But because there is a problem with the slaughtering of that, and that's why it's best to stay away. But if someone does eat a machine slaughtered chicken, we don't go and condemn them and say we're going to make a protest against them and make fatwas against them. But to be on the safe side, you should stay away from machine slaughtered chicken, because it is doubtful. And what is the hadith? You can learn just one thing today. دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. Stay away from things that are doubtful and take what things are certain. Like, did we get to the brother behind you? Go ahead.
Referring to Brother Yami, because when you're on the line, like the Sabbath, something like that, they're using the same gloves, touching so many different ingredients. So what are you going to say about this particular part? They're touching.
I didn't understand your question exactly.
The question is, like when they're making a sandwich,
Mm-hmm.
they have a gloves on.
They keep the same gloves on.
Keep
So you
the
have to
same
tell them
gloves.
to change their gloves, please. Take new gloves, and if you're using the same, please wash it,
Right.
clean it, and then use it.
Because in any
Easy one.
field you're in, like in America, they're all sensitive about religion, your ethnicity, and like what you're allowed to do and what not to do. So you shouldn't feel embarrassed to ask someone to change the knife or wipe the knife or to change your gloves, because that's what they're taught to do, to be sensitive to other people's culture and religion.
Yeah, people respect that. When you tell them, they don't feel bad, or they don't
They
argue,
want
or
your
they don't.
business.
Huh?
They want your business.
Yeah, they want to make it. The customer's always right. Customer's always right. No.
Okay, so I have two questions actually. The first one is like kosher meat, you know, they do it like, you know, in the name of Allah and like everything. So is that okay, or?
I think like a lot.
Yeah, I think we need a whole special night for that, inshallah. Yeah, we will do that, inshallah. One night we will specify just for halal consumption, food, different types of food and different ingredients. Kosher will be part of it.
And then the second question, it's away from like meat.
Mhm.
So like, I guess this might also be like a night in itself, but like you mentioned like, you know, madhab like hopping. So like if someone asks you like what's like a concrete answer I can give for like, you know, why you have to follow like a specific madhab?
Ah, very good question. That why a person should follow one madhab. Okay? أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. Follow Allah and His Messenger and the people who have control over you. So ulil amr, that's the normal meaning that they take. People with ulil amr, authority. So the scholars of tafsir say that ulul amr here it means the scholars of the deen, the fuqaha. So follow them. Allah says in the Quran, أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. Right? That's one ayah. And the other ayah, لعلمه الذين فردوا إلى الله وإلى الرسول. How does the ayah go? لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منه. What is before that? And the حافظ حافظات. That if you have any difficulty in your deen, then ask those people who can give you the answer, taking out the rulings, istinbat. لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْ. So they can drive the rulings. The people of understanding, you cannot go to anybody. You have to go to the people of knowledge, so they will drive the rulings from the principles and give you the answer. So that's the ayat. If someone can remember the beginning of the ayah.
What's the reason?
No?
Do you know like
It's surah, the 5th juz in Surah Al-Muhsanat. In Juz Al-Muhsanat, the 5th juz, which will be Surah Al-Nisa. And Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah ati'u Rasul wal amri minkum. That's also in Surah Al-Nisa. Someone can look up the number of the ayah. No.
Is chemically purified alcohol, which are being used in pharmaceutical industry and cosmetic industry, by injectable form or lotion or cream. What is the option?
The hukum, okay. For alcohol, there are synthetic alcohols that they're not used to consume. They're not edible, right? And if someone uses that alcohol, what will happen?
Your intestines will.
Person will die.
No, the question is, whether this is najas or not.
Yeah,
This
so-
is not
so coming to
question of
that.
synthetic or not. This
So
is
if
chemically
it's
mostly ethyl alcohol on the
okay.
base of petroleum jelly,
Mhm.
any ointment or any medical cream or any injectable.
So that's the thing. If it's pure alcohol, then it's not permissible. But if it's synthetic alcohol, the scholars are working on this, and there's some fatwa from the Hanafi school that is permissible, because it's not the actual alcohol. You don't get intoxicated. You don't get high if you drink that. You'll die if you consume a lot. So that's why they say that it's permissible. And I've asked a few
That's the one that you just only use topically.
Yeah.
That's, I think we're talking about that.
External
Or
use
for
only.
wounds and stuff,
Yeah.
that was more permissible
Yeah,
because if
it
you
is.
consume it internally, it starts to burn your organs. But
It
in
is,
other
it is not
alcohol-
the alcohol because one of the principles of being alcohol or something that's not permissible that makes the person high. It's toxicated. It makes It's called mukhamarat al-aql. So ma yukhamar al-aql bi haram. So that's the ruling that they derive from khamr. Khamr, it means wine. So anything that makes a person high, it will be haram under this principle. So that alcohol is not the actual alcohol. It's synthetic, or it's different chemicals put together. So that's why it will be permissible, and it's okay to use it. That's my opinion, because there are some discussions. Still, there's no consensus on this. There's still ikhtilaf, I think. Allah knows best. A lot of things I don't know. No. Go ahead. Yeah.
I've heard, and I don't know how true this is, that the early incarnations of the birth control pill were drawn from the urine of a pregnant horse.
Some medications are derived from that as well.
There are a lot of things like that. And also, I was just very unemployed and bored. I was reading the ingredients on a lotion, and it had something called urea in it, and I'm not sure what that is. I don't know. If it is derived from the urine of an animal, would that be an issue?
If it has a substantial amount, meaning that there is some kind of percentage of it. If it's like so little that, because very little, it's kal ma'dum, that's also principle. If it's very little, like something like alcohol, if it's, the alcohol level is less than 0.05, that's permissible. Like there's a drink that is available, it's called kombucha. If anybody knows, everybody had it before. It has a 0.04 or 3%. So anything more than 0.05% alcohol, it's not permissible to consume. Because that very little, it's kal ma'dum, it's like nothing. It's like nil. Allah. I think should we end here? Okay.
Another question about animals. I was told that dogs, right, their whole body is popped except for their mouth and their saliva.
Saliva, yes.
So you can't pet a dog.
So, yes. And if that dog enters the water, puts his feet in the water, or his body in the water, and the mouth doesn't touch the water, it's permissible to use it.
Okay. And a question about cats. I've been told that cat was the pet of our Nabi Sallallahu.
Very good question.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh. Someone told me that if a cat sits on, you know how cats like to sit on soft things, like janamas, or they like to sit on pillows and things, that by nature of the cat just sitting there, by virtue of that alone, if that thing is now not popped because it's an animal and it has najis on it, especially its hindquarters.
Okay. So, there's a principle that any animal or pet that not a pet, or any animal that it is usually in the houses, like mice, right? And what else? In other places they have snakes, right? Those animals are najis, right? If you slaughter a cat, you cannot eat it, right? It's not permissible. So any animal that is not permissible to consume, the saliva is also najis, right? But those animals that live inside the house, those animals, their saliva will be permissible. It is just there's a karah in it. So if the cat drinks from something, or licks something, or its saliva touches anything, it is okay. And the ruling is that طوافين. The hadith says, إِنَّهَا مِنَ الطَّوَّافِينَ عَلَيْكُمُ الطَّوَّافَاتِ. That these are the animals that they always come inside your house, right? In other places, mashallah, in Bangladesh and Pakistan, I've seen cats just get inside the house from somewhere, right? They can get in the house. So it is hard to prevent them. So that's why their saliva is permissible. Same thing mice, same thing rats.
So these items are still popped after or
Yes.
potted after
Yeah.
examination?
Cat can be on your clothing or it touches or licks or anything. It's permissible. Khalas? Enough? We have what? 9 hours till Fajr. Yeah.
I just want to say something real quick from the viewpoint of hikmah. And considering this was based on a conversation I had with Shaykh AbdurRahman Ahmad. And it's about, like you said, people, the way they view dogs here in America. And considering that in the Maliki madhab, the saliva of the dog is not najasa. So alhamdulillah, I'm Shafi or Hanafi, alhamdulillah we follow our madhab. And it's not about hopping. But I think it's important to have a lot of hikmah when you're talking to people, especially from America. And there have been a lot of people on the verge of becoming Muslim. But then because of cultural ideas about dogs and dislike of dogs, and the way people could react saying, oh, stop, I know you can't keep your dog, or you can't, then they could then not become Muslim. Whereas they could have become Maliki and they could have had the dog on their sajada. Which is true. I mean, that's right. And so I think it's really important to, you know, to understand that things can't be made difficult. My own mother, because when I first became Muslim, and my own ignorance of that, until this day, like, you know, it hurts them.
Absolutely.
She'll ask me, you love the dog, don't you love the dog? I'll say, yes, I love the dog, Mom. No, you don't love the dog. I mean, 24 years later, we're having the same conversation. Whereas
they'll never forget that.
Whereas they'll never forget it. Whereas, you know, I could have known that, you know, the Maliki mother, because, okay, Mom, you just become a Maliki and you're okay.
And that's why I indicated that in the beginning, that people have a very strong relation with dogs. They have a very strong relation, so we have to understand that. Keep that in mind. Very close.
I don't mean to bring back up.
We have a brother there. After him. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, your brother here wants to know whether it's permissible to take ablution with the ocean water.
Ocean water, you can swim in and pray right after that. You can make wudu, you can make tahara, because it is ma'un mutlaq, it is simple water. And it's on its origin, as the water of the ocean, it is salty. And anything that is permissible is tahir, it's clean. If you add it to the water, it's still tahir. You can still use it. Unless, in the Hanafi fiqh we have, that it doesn't change the three awsaf, the three characteristics of the water, that it doesn't change the color, the taste, and the smell. But if it changes that, and it changes the water's actual name, so you don't call, like for example, what is if you make
Rose water.
Like you,
When you add powdered lemonade.
yeah, lemonade, yeah, absolutely. Lemonade, right? You add something into the water, the taste change, the color change, and the smell also changes. And you don't call it water, you call it lemonade. So you cannot use that water to make oral soap. Yeah, but simple, the ocean water, you can make wudu or oral soap from it. We had one question from there. Okay.
What about the water in the swimming pool?
It's okay, because it's ma'ul kathir, it's a lot of water. So even if someone urinates in the water, in a swimming pool, it is still tahir, because it's a lot of water. And kathir al-ma' yahmil al-khabath, right? That lot of water can carry najasa, and it's permissible to use that water. I know it's funny, but people do it. do everything in a swimming pool.
The public,
And that's why it doesn't smell right.
public swimming pools have so many people donating.
Yeah, it's common. Especially when you have kids.
So you can make wudu with that water?
It looks very good, it looks nice and blue water, but it's... But anyway, it's fine. You can swim, definitely. Now, there was a child before you, so I'll take you next. Yeah, go ahead.
So technically, like, are the dogs allowed to come inside a Muslim home, or like, do they have to stay in the room?
That's a great question. If you're keeping a dog for safety, or if you're using that dog to hunt,
I didn't hear the question.
the question is that where you keep the dog, in your house or you keep it in the garage, or you have a dog house outside in your backyard. So if you have it in the backyard, that's perfect. For whatever purpose you have it. But inside the house, you can keep it for safety or for hunting. So if for one of these two reasons, you can keep a dog. Otherwise, the house that has dog, the angels of Rahmah, the angels of mercy do not enter that house. It's tough to tell someone who has a dog or a non-Muslim that, oh, I'm not entering your house because no angels are coming in this house. Inshallah, your Karam and Katibin is going to stay with you and with him as well. Yes. Problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, the brother had a question about the public. I don't think you heard him. You wanted, so the public swimming pools, you cannot make wudu from, or you can?
You can. It is permissible. Okay. It is tahir. It is clean. Even if you saw someone urinating in front of you.
Okay.
Only one condition, yes, there's one condition, that if you see the najasa on one side, and you can see it physically there, then you cannot make wudu from that part. You can make wudu from another area. Because it's huge, right? It doesn't mix up very quickly. Yeah. Now, make it even, one from here, one from there. Now, Aisha.
I was wondering about the pool.
The pool?
Yeah, the
Okay.
water. Yeah, it has like a lot of pools. Most pools, some are salt, but most pools are like modified like chemicals and things. So like if you go in, would that be pure for you to make ghusl in it?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Unless you don't see and the whole water, the color changes.
It smells, yeah, most
Nope.
like it smells of the chlorine.
That's fine. That's fine. It is permissible. Fine. You don't have to make wudu or ghusl after that. It is good to be tayyib.
Oh, yeah.
But again, usually wherever there's a swimming pool, there is water other than the swimming pool.
There is a shower
that you can make wudu
There's usually chlorine in the swimming pool.
No.
This actually happened. This is a true story. Okay. We went to the beach with my husband and his brother, the Mawlana.
MashaAllah.
And Mawlana, they're standing, swear to God, they're standing right next to the ocean on the beach. I said, oh, this is lovely. But now it's time for Zohar. Where are we going to make wudu? So I said, you two are standing next to the ocean. Come on. They said, no, this is cold. It's got salt in it. They looked at me like I was saying something that didn't make sense. So they went into a restaurant, like they went across the beach, everything. So what is more preferable, the water of the ocean or piped in water from municipality?
Whatever your wife says, that's preferable.
This was so many years ago. It's just a joke now.
But some people, cause salty water. I go to the beach a lot, and I've swum a lot in the beach, and I know how it feel. Because salty water, after the water touches your body, it's salty. You feel itchy. You don't feel comfortable sometimes. Sometimes people have allergy to salt and salty water. So if they don't feel comfortable, then they can choose. But if there's no other water, you cannot make tayammum because there's an ocean in front of you. You'll have to make, you have to make wudu with that water. And that ruling also applies for Zamzam. If a person has Zamzam water, it is makruh because of the barakah and tabarruk of that water, and because of the special water. You should not make wudu and ghusl and clean anything which is najis. But if you have only Zamzam water, and you have no other water, you will have to use that Zamzam water to make wudu. You cannot make tayammum. Yes.
I have a question about ocean water. I don't know, what you said about man kathir, when you have a lot of water, and even if there's something najis in that water, it's still considered tahir.
Kathir, right?
Yeah, kathir. It's still considered tahir until like the taste or the smell of that water is altered. So with ocean water, the smell is different and the taste is different. But is the reason why it's not najis is because salt is not najis? Is that why?
No, you have to, that meaning that you can taste the najasa or see the najasa or smell the najasa. Otherwise, salt it takes away. That's why it's salty. I think that's how Allah made it. So it purifies. It's chlorine better than chlorine.
One more question. People say that if you have a baby on your lap and he or she urinates on you, your clothing is still hot because the urine of babies is not najis.
There is a difference in the other madhab, but according to the Hanafi fiqh, both babies, girl, boy, the urine is najis. Yeah, you have to wash it.
And if they spit up also, that's
No.
also...
Spitting up, it means that if they vomit, then that will be considered najis. But if it's just a little bit, then it's tahir. A little bit vomit, it is tahir, but if it's mouthful, right, and you vomit mouthful, then that vomit is najis. It breaks your wudu and it's najis. So anything that comes out of the body and it necessitates wudu, then it means that's najis. So for example, like blood, vomit, anything else.
So what if the mom is, feeding her baby and they vomit on her and she has to go pray?
That's why they get more ajr. They get more ajr for that difficulty.
Wash off that spot, that would be sufficient.
Yeah, you don't have to take the whole shirt and put it in the washing machine and wash the whole thing. If you just wash the place where there's a najasa, and one thing I would like to add here for the women, that besides urine and the period that they go through, the menses, there's some liquid that it comes out, and what is it called? Licoria, something like that, right? That it also breaks the wudu, and it's also najis. It's not urine. It's a white color. It's called licoria, and it comes out, and it's normal. It's not a disease or something. So that it also breaks the wudu, and it's najis. You have to wash that part. But on the other hand, sometimes people feel that doubt. They're always in a doubt. Oh, I feel wetness. But what happens that they go and check, there's nothing there. So what is the ruling? Review time. Al-yaqinu la yazulu bish-shak. So until you don't have certainty that something came out and is wet, you will not consider that a naqd al-wudu, that breaks the wudu, until you are certain. And in particular, there's a shaitan that comes and puts doubts. And for men, after using the bathroom, sometimes people feel that there's a drop of urine came out. So until you don't have certainty and you see it physically, you shouldn't be following that doubt. But at the same time, a person should be very careful in the istinja, that a person should wait for a minute or two to make sure that all the drops came out and there's nothing remaining, and you have itmi'nan, meaning that you are content, then you should proceed and make a wudu. And if after that you just have doubts, you just neglect those doubts, put those aside. But that's important. Any other question? خلاص. طيب سبحان الله بحمده سبحان الله العظيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة. الحمد لله.